Good morning, everybody. Um, it's sort of me today and and some notes. Uh, I'm just gonna talk here for a little bit, and then I'm going to show a video, just like a substitute teacher in class. My name is Jamelyn Gray. For those of you who don't know, I'm a producer on You've Got a Thing, among many other things, but that's the predominant function here today. This week, where we started out with programming and where we ended up are two totally different things. We started out with as it being Women's History Month, trying to get some women together from the Milwaukee Theater Alliance to talk about the history of the pandemic and what we've all been doing over the course of the pandemic as far as programming is concerned. And then Tuesday happened, where 6 Asian women were shot by a domestic terrorist in the Atlanta area, by a white domestic terrorist in the Atlanta area. And by the time we got to today, it just did not feel right to go with business as usual. I definitely do not feel like celebrating or promoting or any of those sort of things. We're just in a moment in time where attention needs to be put elsewhere. So I reached out to a lot of colleagues about today's program, and I thought it best to try to put some focus on not only what we're trying to do with the Milwaukee Theater Alliance, but the racist, sexist actions of a white terrorist this past week needs to be amplified in a way that we can stop Asian hate, that we can move on, that we can all join forces and fight against white supremacy and make things better and more equitable for all. This is something that we've been working on in the Milwaukee Theater Alliance for quite a bit now. And actually this week we were just about to release a document that we've been working on called the Milwaukee Theater Standards, which encompasses many of these ideals of battling, of anti-racism, anti-bigotry, anti-sexual harassment, anti-sexual abuse. I want you to know that I am not an expert in anything, really, by any means. Maybe only putting one foot in front of the other. I think the course of my life, that's all I've got right now, is I'm an expert on putting one foot in front of the other. But I am a woman. I am 100% a white woman, and I say that just as an awareness of who I am, of who I am on the outside to the world. But my background and sort of being the parent of a special needs adult now has really bent my view on the world, and we can only be better when all people are truly equal. And so what happened this week from a woman's perspective was sexist, misogynistic, an attack on women, and particularly women of color, the numbers, skyrocket as to what they are subjected to as far as violence against women. I do come from a background of domestic violence in my childhood home, and so I'm familiar with violence against women in my own way. And so I was searching things around the internet to put forward today to not have me talk for 20 minutes. I wanted some other perspectives. There was and I'm gonna talk about some of these things, and then I'll try and get the links into the video comments as well. Senator Dr. Michelle Au from who's a state senator from Georgia had put a speech forward on this Monday, before the shooting on Tuesday, about attacks on Asian Americans and Asian people in this country. It was a 4-minute speech, and I tried to find a good link to it. It is on her Twitter. The quality wasn't sort of good enough to show you. But I'm going to put these links and resources and all of these things out there for you to watch. That this is something that's been happening, particularly over the time of COVID, with people out there calling it, and the former president calling it the Kung Flu, and all of those horrible, awful names that have made attacks on Asian Americans more prevalent. And we can go into a long thing, which I'm not an expert on, don't have time for, about the long history of Asian Americans in this country. And that's something that I would encourage you all to go and research. And again, we'll try and provide these resources as well. But she was talking about, in 4 minutes, what's been going on, bringing that to the attention of her colleagues in Georgia the day before this attack. So again, that's Senator Dr. Michelle Au, AU, but I will put that resource out there. There is also the Asian American Pacific Islander Coalition of Wisconsin on Facebook, AAPI. That is a group that we just posted on Facebook that you should go and follow, that also has great resources. Where this all connects to Milwaukee Theater and the Milwaukee Theater Alliance, sort of on a greater scale of what I see and what my colleagues in the Theater Alliance sees, and what we're trying to work on here, is I personally believe that theater is a public good. I believe that the world would be better if everybody in the world would go and watch live theater. That's my mission. That's my advocacy. I believe in its empathy and what it teaches, and the community that it builds, and those sorts of things. How can we, as theater artists in Milwaukee, help our friends and colleagues in the Asian American community? That's the big question here. I was bouncing this off a great human being, MacArthur Antigua at Imagine MKE, who is sort of a parent organization. I don't even know, just a partner organization of the Milwaukee Theater Alliance. That's great people and staff, and he was the one who brought that forward. What can we do as theater artists for our Asian American, for the AAPI community through theater arts in Milwaukee. So that's sort of the big question that we're looking at today. I'm going to play this video that came through my Facebook feed from one of the people that I really admire within the community, and that's Sherry Pennell Williams. Posted this came through hers of Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, who is a senator in Georgia, just elected this past term. I think Georgia, sort of separate from what we saw this week, as far as the terrorist event against Asian women is concerned, they're going through some epic changes. Two senators, Senator Warnock is now the first Black senator from Georgia. Jon Ossoff is the first Jewish senator, and the Senator Dr. Michelle Au is their first Asian American state senator. I am in awe. A lot of people have credited that work to Black women in Georgia and the hard work that they have been doing over the past decade to help these changes happen. In Senator Warnock's speech, he's talking from a very political sense, and I'm not trying to make this political. I do want to connect the pieces of what we're trying to do with the Milwaukee Theater Alliance and working with Imagine MKE to promote civic action and how we need to be more involved in the systems in our government, as down to arts funding and representation and equality. We need to be more vocal. We need to be more involved to make changes happen. We need to show our representatives what's important to us. He also says some very poignant things about what happened this week. And so I just want to leave that to him. Please feel free to comment along with the video. Please feel free to post links. We will use all of those links to post on the MTA Facebook page and use those resources in our newsletter that was supposed to go out this week, but we need to push that to another time. Anything that we can put out there to help you all and you to help your fellow artists and your colleagues. Again, the big question is, how can we theater artists help our friends and colleagues, our Asian American and Pacific Islander friends in the community through theater arts? Please watch this video. He covers a lot of ground. He talks about his mom, and it's just very poignant things about how change happens, how it can happen, how there is still hope. I also want to mention my friend Jim Neuner brought up that tomorrow is World Day of Theater for Children, something positive. Teach them while they're young. Racism isn't inherent. Racism is taught. So how can we as theater artists help stop Asian hate, stop racism, stop white supremacy, all of those things. How can we, what do we have within our power to make those things happen? But please watch Senator Warnock's words and follow along, type some comments, type some links, and we've got some work to do. I genuinely mean that, and I'm here to do the work and to help and facilitate, and that's what I do. That's my thing. One foot in front of the other, and facilitate. So, please, please just watch this very smart man.
Wisconsin homeowners, if you have a power meter like this on the side of your house, you can qualify to erase your energy bill at no cost to you by
the senator from Georgia. Mr. President, before I begin my formal remarks, I want to pause to condemn the hatred and violence that took 8 precious lives last night in metropolitan Atlanta. I grieve with Georgians, with Americans, with people of love all across the world. This unspeakable violence, visited largely upon the Asian community, is one that causes all of us to recommit ourselves to the way of peace, an active peace that prevents these kinds of tragedies from happening in the first place. We pray for these families. Mr. President, I rise here today as a proud American and as one of the newest members of the Senate in awe of the journey that has brought me to these hallowed halls, and with an abiding sense of reverence and gratitude for the faith and sacrifices of ancestors who paved the way. I am a proud son of the great state of Georgia, born and raised in Savannah, a coastal city known for its cobblestone streets and verdant town squares, towering oak trees, centuries old and covered in gray Spanish moss, stretch from one side of the street to the other, bend and beckon the lover of history and horticulture to this city by the sea. I was educated at Morehouse College, and I still serve in the pulpit of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, both in Atlanta, the cradle of the civil rights movement. And so, like those oak trees in Savannah, my roots go down deep, and they stretch wide in the soil of Waycross, Georgia, and Burke County, and Scriven County. In a word, I am Georgia, a living example and embodiment of its history and its hope, of its pain and promise, the brutality and possibility. Mr. President, at the time of my birth, Georgia's 2 senators were Richard B. Russell and Herman E. Talmadge, both arch segregationists and unabashed adversaries of the civil rights movement. After the Supreme Court's landmark Brown versus Board ruling outlawing school segregation, Talmadge warned that blood will run in the streets of Atlanta. Senator Talmadge's father, Eugene Talmadge, former governor of our state, had famously declared, "The South loves the Negro in his place, but his place is at the back door." When once asked how he and his supporters might keep Black people away from the polls, he picked up a scrap of paper and wrote a single word on it: pistols. Yet there is something in the American covenant, in its charter documents, and its Jeffersonian ideals that bends toward freedom. And led by a preacher and a patriot named King, Americans of all races stood up. History vindicated the movement that sought to bring us closer to our ideals, to lengthen and strengthen the cords of our democracy. And I now hold the seat, the Senate seat, where Herman E. Talmadge sat. That's why I love America. I love America because we always have a path to make it better, to build a more perfect union. It is a place where a kid like me who grew up in public housing, first college graduate in my family, can now stand as a United States Senator. I had an older father. He was born in 1917. Serving in the Army during World War II, he was once asked to give up his seat to a young teenager while wearing his soldier's uniform. They said making the world safe for democracy. But he was never bitter. And by the time I came along, he had already seen the arc of change in our country. He maintained his faith in God and in his family and in the American promise, and he passed that faith on to his children. My mother grew up in Waycross, Georgia. You know where that is? It's way across Georgia. And like a lot of Black teenagers in the 1950s, she spent her summers picking somebody else's tobacco and somebody else's cotton. But because this is America, the 82-year-old hands that used to pick somebody else's cotton went to the polls in January and picked her youngest son to be a United States Senator. Ours is a land where possibility is born of democracy, a vote, a voice, a chance to help determine the direction of the country and one's own destiny within it, possibility born of democracy. That's why this past November and January, my mom and other citizens of Georgia grabbed hold of that possibility and turned out in record numbers, 5 million in November, 4.4 million in January, far more than ever in our state's history. Turnout for a typical runoff doubled. And the people of Georgia sent their first African-American senator and first Jewish senator, my brother Jon Ossoff, to these hallowed halls. But then what happened? Some politicians did not approve of the choice made by the majority of voters in a hard-fought election in which each side got the chance to make its case to the voters. And rather than adjusting their agenda, rather than changing their message, they're busy trying to change the rules. We are witnessing right now a massive and unabashed assault on voting rights, unlike anything we've ever seen since the Jim Crow era. This is Jim Crow in new clothes. Since the January election, some 250 voter suppression bills have been introduced by state legislatures all across the country, from Georgia to Arizona, from New Hampshire to Florida, using the big lie of voter fraud as a pretext for voter suppression. The same big lie that led to a violent insurrection on this very Capitol the day after my election. Within 24 hours, we elected Georgia's first African-American Jewish senator, and hours later, the Capitol was assaulted. We see in just a few precious hours the tension very much alive in the soul of America. And the question before all of us at every moment is, what will we do to push us in the right direction. And so politicians driven by that big lie aim to severely limit and in some cases eliminate automatic and same-day voter registration, mail-in and absentee voting, and early voting and weekend voting. They want to make it easier to purge voters from the voting roll altogether. And as a voting rights activist, I've seen up close just how draconian these measures can be. I hail from a state that purged 200,000 voters from the roll one Saturday night in the middle of the night. We know what's happening here. Some people don't want some people to vote. I was honored on a few occasions to stand with our hero and my parishioner, John Lewis. I was his pastor, but I'm clear he was my mentor. On more than one occasion, we boarded buses together after Sunday church services as part of our Souls to the Polls program, encouraging the Ebenezer Church family and communities of faith to participate in the democratic process. Now, just a few months after Congressman Lewis's death, there are those in the Georgia legislature, some who even dared to praise his name, that are now trying to get rid of Sunday Souls to the Polls, making it a crime for people who pray together to get on a bus together in order to vote together. I think that's wrong. Matter of fact, I think that a vote is a kind of prayer for the kind of world we desire for ourselves and for our children. And our prayers are stronger when we pray together. To be sure, we have seen these kinds of voter suppression tactics before. They are a part of a long and shameful history in Georgia and throughout our nation, but refusing to be denied. Georgia citizens and citizens across our country brave the heat and the cold and the rain, some standing in line for 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, just to exercise their constitutional right to vote. Young people, old people, sick people, working people, already underpaid, forced to lose wages to pay a kind of poll tax while standing in line to vote. And how do some politicians respond? Well, they're trying to make it a crime to give people water and a snack as they wait in lines that are obviously being made longer by their draconian actions. Think about that. Think about that. They are the ones making the lines longer through these draconian actions. And then they want to make it a crime to bring grandma some water while she's waiting in a line that they're making longer. Make no mistake, this is democracy in reverse. Rather than voters being able to pick the politicians are trying to cherry pick their voters. I say this cannot stand. And so I rise, Mr. President, because that sacred and noble idea, one person, one vote, is being threatened right now. Politicians in my home state and all across America, in their craven lust for power, have launched a full-fledged assault on voting rights. They are focused on winning at any cost, even the cost of the democracy itself. And I submit that it is the job of each citizen to stand up for the voting rights of every citizen. And it is the job of this body to do all that it can to defend the viability of our democracy. That's why I am a proud co-sponsor of the For the People Act, which we introduced today. The For the People Act is a major step in the march toward our democratic ideals, making it easier, not harder, for eligible Americans to vote by instituting common sense pro-democracy reforms, like establishing national automatic voter registration for every eligible citizen, and allowing all Americans to register to vote online and on election day, requiring states to offer at least 2 weeks of early voting, including weekends, in federal elections, keeping Souls to the Polls programs alive, prohibiting states from restricting a person's ability to vote absentee or by mail, and preventing states from purging the voter rolls based solely on unreliable evidence like someone's voting history, something we've seen in Georgia and other states in recent years. And it would end the dominance of big money in our politics and ensure our public servants are there serving the public. Amidst these voter suppression laws and tactics, including partisan and racial gerrymandering, and then a system awash in dark money and the dominance of corporatist interests and politicians who do their bidding, the voices of the American people have been increasingly drowned out and crowded out and squeezed out of their own democracy. We must pass For the People so that the people might have a voice. Your vote is your voice, and your voice is your human dignity. But not only that, we must pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. You know, voting rights used to be a bipartisan issue. The last time the voting rights bill was reauthorized was 2006. George W. Bush was president, and it passed this chamber 98-0. But then in 2013, the Supreme Court rejected the successful formula for supervision and preclearance contained in the 1965 Voting Rights Act. They asked Congress to fix it. That was nearly 8 years ago. And the American people are still waiting. Stripped of protections, voters in states with a long history of voter discrimination and voters in many other states have been thrown to the winds. We Americans have noisy and spirited debates about many things, and we should. That's what it means to live in a free country. But access to the ballot ought to be nonpartisan. I submit that there should be 100 votes in this chamber for policies that will make it easier for Americans to make their voices heard in our democracy. Surely, there ought to be at least 60 in this chamber who believe, as I do, that the four most powerful words uttered in a democracy are "the people have spoken." Therefore, we must ensure that all of the people can speak. But if not, we must still pass voting rights. The right to vote is preservative of all other rights. It is not just another issue alongside other issues. It is foundational. It is a reason why any of us has the privilege of standing here in the first place. It is about the covenant we have with one another as an American people, e pluribus unum, out of many one. It, above all else, must be protected. And so let's be clear. I'm not here today to spiral into the procedural argument regarding whether the filibuster in general has merits or has outlived its usefulness. I'm here to say that this issue is bigger than the filibuster. I stand before you saying that this issue, access to voting and preempting politicians' efforts to restrict voting, is so fundamental to our democracy that it is too important to be held hostage by a Senate rule, especially one historically used to restrict expansion of voting rights. It is a contradiction to say we must protect minority rights in the Senate while refusing to protect minority rights in the society. Colleagues, no Senate rule should overrule the integrity of our democracy. And we must find a way to pass voting rights whether we get rid of the filibuster or not. And so as I close, and nobody believes a preacher when he says as I close, let me say that I, as a man of faith, I believe that democracy is the political enactment of a spiritual idea. The sacred worth of all human beings. The notion that we all have within us a spark of the divine and a right to participate in the shaping of our destiny. Reinhold Niebuhr was right. Humanity's capacity for justice makes democracy possible, but humanity's inclination to injustice makes democracy necessary. John Lewis understood that and was beaten on a bridge defending it. Amelia Boynton, like so many women not mentioned nearly enough, was gassed on that same bridge. A white woman named Viola Luiso was killed. Medgar Evers was murdered in his own driveway. Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, two Jews and an African American standing up for that sacred idea of democracy, also paid the ultimate price. And we in this body would be stopped and stymied by partisan politics, short-term political gain, Senate procedure. I say let's get this done no matter what. I urge my colleagues to pass these two bills, strengthen and lengthen the cords of our democracy, secure our credibility as the premier voice for freedom-loving people and democratic movements all over the world, and win the future for all of our children. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Thank you for those who were here to listen to Senator Warnock. I've put some links in the comments. Like I said, we have work to do. You can go to Milwaukee Theatre, that's an RE, alliance.org, to reach out to us and to join the team if you're looking for a place for arts advocacy. I also put a link in there from Imagine MKE. They are also an arts advocate organization. Like I said, I do believe that this world would be better if everybody watched theater. We need to get more arts access to everybody, and also visit the AAPI for Wisconsin Facebook page. Follow them. And they had organized a march yesterday. There's work out there. I hope you can help. I hope you can help us, help Imagine, help the city and Wisconsin to be better at arts civic action. And hopefully next week we can bring women from the MTA on to sort of close out this month of women's history. Again, 6 Asian women were murdered. I know what's being said out there, but you can't tell me that it's not racist and misogynist and all of those things that they are. So let's do some work together. I'm here to listen. Come find me, and we'll see you next week on You've Got a Thing.